Hey everybody, welcome to a conversation on James.
Yeah. What
It's
are we
just
talking?
me and Rachel today.
Yeah.
Uh, so I apologize for anything that happens.
What? We'll be fine.
Sure.
Are you gonna what could happen? Like, what is the worst that could happen?
We just run out of things to say,
Oh,
which is pretty common for me.
well, I talk enough for all of us.
Yeah.
It's fine.
So I need her to carry it.
I was worried that it was gonna be something like you were gonna throw me through a window or big fighting.
Yeah.
No. Arguments about James.
I honestly haven't been in depth or haven't jumped into the content as much as I normally
You've
have.
been a little busy.
Yeah,
You've got things on your mind.
We're building out the fifth corner church location.
Yeah.
And it's the first week of build out, so it's just any free time I've spent there.
How's it been going? I haven't been there as much as you, obviously.
So yeah, 2 days ago, my friend Michael and I spent probably 6 or 7 hours sanding one wall.
Yeah, which wall? Was that
the mural wall?
Oh, is the mural gone or sanded down? Is it a faded version?
Flat.
Okay,
Yeah, it's flat.
that's exciting.
We actually found that there's murals behind the murals.
Murals behind the murals.
Yeah,
okay.
That was part of the reason it was so bumpy. But I brought 2 electric sanders and we put fresh batteries in them in the morning at like 8:30 a.m. Sanded until the batteries died, which happened at around 11:15.
Wow.
Then we put them in the chargers, went to lunch, and then when we came back, we sanded again until the batteries died, and then we called it quits.
Yeah. But is it done? Not the sanding, but is that wall done? Perfect, ready to be painted?
There's a hole that I patched yesterday that needs to be just hand sanded the mud a little bit. But other than that, yeah, that's Sunday is our next big work day. There's about 10 people coming to work, and everything up to this point has been prepping so that they can paint. And so that'll be the painting crew on Sunday. And honestly, depending on how the painting goes, we could be pretty close to where we just start bringing stuff over, start staging things. When Scott is in France with his family, and he gets back on the 11th, and his big job will be to build the counters.
Yeah.
And so the goal is to have every project finished before he gets back so that he can just focus on the counters. Yeah. So we made some decisions yesterday of layout and to simplify things, but
nice.
Yeah.
I know, like, with Scott being on vacation, normally we try to not text people on vacation at all, but Scott, he's texted us a few times. Like,
yeah, just ignore him.
He sent me one text and I said, I've got it. You're on vacation. Yeah. Go. And he didn't respond. So I think that maybe
the only time I texted him was the Olsons came and helped last night. And Clay Olson, the youngest, he's like, what, is he 5?
5 or 6.
5 or 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, do you have a message for Scott? And his message was the best. He's like, I think we're making pretty good progress, but with a mouthful of pretzels.
But he likes to work, right? Like, isn't that his thing? He kind of gets into the tools.
Yeah, there's a part in that. So we were taping a bunch yesterday, and there's a place in the kitchen where the FRP and the tile meet.
Yeah.
And so we won't be painting any of that, obviously. But because he saw everyone else taping edges of stuff, he went and taped, and so I'm leaving that blue tape up.
I love it.
On the wall right there because that was Clay.
Clay did it.
Clay took initiative and did some work, and it doesn't matter,
great.
But it's
adorable. It matters because it's like him being invested and being a part, and even just like who he is as a person. That he, as a 5-year-old, was like, everyone else is taping, so I'm going to go tape too, and like he took it on, and I love it. I love that.
The amount of days that I've worked there and just random people showed up to say hi, to check it out, to help has been really cool, really fun. It's almost like I wish I was down there right now because I bet there's random people walking by
just wanting to come
love to pop in their head and
I love it.
See. So
well, and like that first day this week, there was about 5 people that showed up, like just right away. So that's really cool.
Yeah, then last night we had. Well, if you put the whole Olsen family, we probably had 7 or 8 last night, which was great. We actually had one girl come who she's not connected to a corner at all. She just saw the Instagram post and reached out and said, I want to help.
That's so cool.
She was like, I really appreciate all the community stuff that Corner does, and so I thought I could help. And so she stayed for like an hour and a half and connected with Meredith, which is great because Meredith is a good people person.
Meredith is a good people person.
And so yeah, it's been my life.
I like it. You're good at this, though. Do you feel good at this, or do you feel like how all this work that's been done this week, all the people that have been coming, like, is this energizing for you, or are you feeling just exhausted a little bit?
Oh, definitely exhausted. Good exhausted, like stuff's getting done, and I enjoy, and I think I'm pretty good at the planning part.
Yeah.
So figuring out what needs to get done next, who's involved, how to involve people, how to get more people connected and doing stuff. Because I think when you step into a big project, it's easy to be overwhelmed and be like, I don't know. There's everything needs to get done, and I can't decide what actually needs to get done.
Yeah, what's priority?
So I think I'm pretty good, and I enjoy breaking that process down. But yeah, I mean, there's never going to be a time with people that's not exhausting for me.
Yeah. But what you are really good at is, I mean, all the things you said, and like, you're not doing it alone. Like, there's so many people that are willing to come and help. And I feel like you're really good at not just getting volunteers, but putting volunteers to work and making sure that they're doing stuff well, and not just you doing it by yourself, which is not always as easy as it looks. I don't know.
No, I think it's sometimes harder to involve people.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, extra work gets done quicker, but there's definitely just managing people is always hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's hard to like
even
give people jobs. And
like yesterday we were prepping to paint, and I was telling everybody, honestly, we're spending most of this evening taping and covering floors and covering stuff.
Yeah.
Because when you have volunteer, like a good painter could go into that space and only use a little bit of tape here and there and paint the whole thing. But when you have volunteers, it's way messier and chaos. And so it's extra work because more people are involved.
Yeah.
Which is good because the community, the theological side of it is that church is not something can be done by a single person.
No.
And so we get to live that out. It's so in a very practical theology way of, hey, this is only works if everybody chips in and does the part.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
That's good. That's exciting. Well, we should just talk about that.
Yeah.
Skip James.
So we're starting a new series on James. And like I said earlier, I feel unprepared to talk about James.
I can talk about James. You talked about that stuff.
That'll happen. I mean, I think I really like James. It's been a long time since I've really dug into James. In fact, I think we did a series on James like 7 or 8 years ago.
Really? Okay.
I can't remember, but yes. Tell me the overview of what James is.
Okay.
Why does it exist as a book?
Okay. Well, I can do some of that, but so James, I can tell you who James is, and kind of why it exists as a book. So, like, James, after Peter started the church in Jerusalem and left to go plant new churches, there was obviously a gap in leadership. So James kind of stepped into that role. So he was kind of the pastor, the leader of the church in Jerusalem for the next 20 years. After
so he's like
Peter left.
the first guy to take over the church that wasn't a disciple.
Right. Yep. And he's Jesus's brother. So he's been around. He saw some of this stuff. And then he also, but he was there for 20 years, and he was courageous. People, like, what I've read is that he was known as being courageous. He was known as being a peacemaker. He was obviously committed. He was there for a long time. And
how long is a long time?
I mean, 20 years. I mean, I feel like that's a decent amount of time before he was martyred. And so like, he and all the people in the church that were impoverished, there was like pending famine going on. And of course, like, everyone was being persecuted. So there's a lot of things happening in the communities at that time.
Persecuted by?
They were Christian Jews. So they were persecuted by Jewish people that weren't Christians, as well as Roman people. So they were persecuted by a lot.
Pretty much everybody around
Nobody liked them.
Yeah.
And so, so that's hard. It's like a hard thing to even talk about. I feel like that division between the Jewish people and the Christian Jews and like what was happening in that moment.
Well, that all of that led up to Jesus' death.
Right.
And so this story takes place, James's story takes place in a continuation of that intense moment.
Right.
The hatred of Jesus, and then these people trying to still defend Jesus. He rose again, all these things.
Yeah.
And they're like trying to snuff out the
this movement needs to end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So James was so he was the leader for 20 years, and then before he was persecuted, or before he was martyred, he was persecuted the whole time. He wrote a collection of his teachings, and that's what James is. And it's not just for his church that he was leading, but it was for all the house churches in the community, which I don't know how many people that would be. Do you know? I feel like you would know that kind of stuff.
Nope.
So, okay. So, but
it's
that
really
was
hard to track the early church, and because there was like small pockets, like as it was spreading, small pockets of people everywhere. Yeah. And I bet there was, I think there was probably way more than we could account for.
Yeah, right. And so James was like a traveling letter. So what I'm interested, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is like, as we're talking about it, like people have kind of interjected things like, we're trying to get people back to who Jesus called them to be and all this, but it's a traveling letter and it's a collection of all his teachings over 20 years. So I don't feel like it's necessarily in response to people walking away from Jesus or not living life like they should be. I feel like it's teaching, it's encouragement. It's like, this is what God's called us to do. Not necessarily because you're not doing it, but because I feel like it's helpful for us to say, okay, we need to be persistent. We need to be seeking wisdom. We need to be doing these things.
Yeah. So the book of James is James, follower of Jesus, who had experienced and seen these things. Mm-hmm. He's trying to teach the people closest to him his understanding of what relationship with Christ is like. Yeah. And then somebody, I don't know, James or something.
I think it was James. He
compiled a lot of those teachings. Probably not everything he ever said, but compiled what he thought was like the condensed, most important version, and tried his best, pre-printing press, to distribute that. Mm-hmm. And so the way that was normally done was it was a letter written to a community or some way, and then it was to be shared that way and then passed around and around and around. Yeah. And that's a lot of the books of the New Testament are similar like that. And so it's in this backdrop that it's best to understand the book of James, because it's not somebody today just writing how to be a Christian. No. It's James saying, this is what I'm experienced in my context, mm-hmm. and this is what I want to encourage people with. And so I always, whenever we start a new series, I think it's so important to like try to reflect on the why the book was written. Right. Because as much as modern evangelicals love to lean onto that all Bible is inspired by God, which is true, but it was inspired by God in a time and place, and for people, and it was written by a person, right? And so it's important to bring in that context of like, because I think, I don't know as much as in James, but like books like Romans, I think if you read them out of context, they can be super. I don't know. I feel like I read Romans out of context, and it was damaging for my understanding of who God is and how He operates and how He perceives people. And so,
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like we just got out of 1st and 2nd John, and those were letters written for a specific purpose. Like the churches he was writing to were struggling with something. And I feel like this is less like that, where it's like, this is to a specific church who is struggling with a specific thing. I feel like this is what, like you just said, what I've, in my 20 years of leading, what feels like the important things that we need to focus on, which, I don't know, for me, that's helpful too, because sometimes, like, I don't know about you, but I feel like there's like all these check boxes that I'm failing at. And it's like, I should pray for this many minutes. I should read my Bible for this many minutes. I should be fasting. And so like, sometimes I think about all these spiritual disciplines that I'm supposed to master and like fit it all in a day. And I'm just like, if I have to do all that in today, I'm not sitting here at podcast because I'm busy doing all these other things and probably not doing them well or for the purpose they were intended, just making sure I'm trying to get it right. So I think that it's easy for me to go, oh, what are all the things that matters? And sometimes, and that it kind of ruins it a little bit, but like it feels like, okay, James is saying, these are the things that I'm saying, I've seen that matters. And how do we grow in these things? So,
and James is it's not a task list.
No.
Which I know sometimes I feel like the Bible would be easier for me if it was just like, just do these things.
Yeah.
And, honestly, if it was, it would probably be things that are impossible to actually do.
Which it is in a way.
Maybe not impossible, but the cost would be insane.
Yeah. Because the purpose behind all the things that we're doing isn't to like check it off. It's like heart change. So if there's a task list that's like, I guess it is a list. Love your neighbor as yourself. Okay. Sure. All my life is focused on that because it's impossible to do 100% of the time.
So in this first section of James, I don't even know what we're covering here.
So
James
1 through 18 verses chapter 1 through 18.
Okay. And so understanding that this is a condensed perspective of what James thinks being a Christian or being a follower of Christ looks like. What is the thing in this section?
So I think this is the like all these, he gives this list of attributes in this first chapter, not just in the section we're talking about, but like in the whole chapter. But the beginning of it says this verse that's I feel like it's super uncomfortable. Like it immediately triggers all of the things in us that make us go, okay. So James 1:4 says, let endurance have its perfect effect so that you will be made perfect and complete, not deficient in anything. So I think like immediately I'm being told to be perfect and like immediately like I'm triggered. Like I'm just like, well, I feel like
failed.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the point?
I failed. I did all the things wrong. And I think too, like in our society, and church culture, like we've been told so long how to look, how to behave, how to act, how to, what makes you look perfect. And so like in my mind, immediately, I feel like it's easy to go to this place of how do I look perfect rather than being perfected. And like Mike and I were talking about it. Mike and I, whenever I say Mike and I, Greg says Mike and Ike. And so I had to get it out. My husband, Mike, and I were talking about this and what the people were going through at this time, like these ideas of what perfection were to us, like dressing well, kids that behave right, I don't swear, and all like I treat people well, and all the things that make me look perfect. I'm never mad. Like some of those things, like they were in famine and they were in poverty and they were being persecuted. Like the things that I might think about looking perfect don't really apply as much. I mean, they probably apply, but it's like they've got different things they're worrying about than what I'm necessarily worrying about. And so it's a whole different, it's just a different culture. Like,
well, the key to understanding that verse is that let endurance have its perfect effect. It's not saying jump to the end.
No, and be perfect.
I imagine James, again, I don't know, but I imagine this is something that James wrote towards the end of his life.
Yeah,
like, looking back in retrospect, of everything I taught, really what matters is the endurance or the longevity or the commitment over time, the process. This is James saying, let the process have its effect. Like, stay in it, stay committed. He's not saying be perfected. He's not saying don't mess up. he's saying what you actually can have impact on is your endurance or your commitment to.
Yeah.
And let that process work itself out in your life.
Yeah. A nicer version that like we liked better, like my husband and I, when we were talking about it, was let perseverance do its work, that you may be mature and complete. And like I kept connecting these thoughts to shalom. And like in the Old Testament, when like we talk about shalom, we think about peace, but it's so much more than that. It's about being whole and complete, and like that shalom in our life. And like there's two things that really spoke to me in this verse. It's one, like Jesus didn't come for us to act and pretend to be perfect and act perfect. Like he came to heal fractured lives. So like his goal in us to be complete and made whole is so connected to him coming and healing us, to healing those fractured pieces. But also it's such a process over time. And I think what's really fun, I don't know if fun's the right word, but fun in all of this is perfection comes out of imperfection. Like these imperfect moments, these imperfect circumstances, these like just, I mean, the focus verse, I'm scrolling. Consider it pure joy, which is hard, right? When you face trials, because you know the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Like all of that is hard to hear. But perseverance finishes this work so we can be mature and complete. So it's like out of this imperfect moment, out of trials, out of hard things, that's where perfection comes from, or that's how we grow and mature. And I say perfection because like, just because they said perfect in the verse at some point, not in that version, but it flips everything on its head, just like everything that these verses do again and again. It's like out of chaos, out of broken, out of imperfect, out of hard. That's how we grow. That's how we mature. That's how we're made complete in like sucky moments.
Especially to people that are being severely persecuted.
Yeah.
Like, it is easy to like read that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the first version. The goal is be perfect.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably a modern issue with reading of it. Like I feel like the people James was talking to, they didn't hear you better be perfect.
No.
They read that, hey, you can be made whole.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a path to it. And even when the worst things in life happen, wholeness, completeness, perfection is the path that you're on.
Yeah.
And the way you stay on it is persevering, being committed, doing those things.
Yeah.
Because it breaks down further into those different attributes, right? Like be persistent, seek wisdom, be humble, full of faithfulness, solid character. These are all things that I would love to like just be able to check them off.
This is the checklist, right? But unfortunately, to get there, you have to go through like
it doesn't say one time.
Yeah, no.
Be wise.
It's
one time. Or be humble. Things. It's like embodying them. Which is unfortunately those.
Kind of unfortunately.
I mean, probably good for the people around you.
Yeah.
But these are aspirational things, and I think it's so important to have things to aspire to as people. I think so often in life that I don't know. I think I see it in parents sometimes. There's the swing, like my parents are really hard on me, and then like the next generation, their parents are like too easy on them.
Yeah.
And there's middle ground is usually the answer for most of those things.
Yeah.
But like I think it's really, really, really important for parents to give their kids something to aspire to, even if that's not what they end up doing. Like, my dad, it was sports. Like I had aspirations in sports. I ended up not doing a lot of that, but like I had something to work towards, and it taught me a lot in life. We were joking yesterday. Brienne asked Acadia for the tape because she was taping the walls for painting, and instead of bringing the blue tape paint or the blue painter's tape, she brought over the tape measure. And we're like, you're a contractor's kid when you ask for tape and they bring a tape measure. But just like them having their kids there, seeing people work towards something gives them some level of aspiration of things. And so James is so helpful in that, of like giving people concrete things to work towards, to aspire towards. And the hard part is that, depending on where you are at life, you could read these things and be like, God doesn't like me because I'm not these things.
Right.
And so it's really important to not just read James in a vacuum.
Yeah.
James is, again, writing to people going through really hard things and trying to give them a path to betterment of life and self and knowing Christ more. And it's a lot of work. And I think James would also say at the same time, like, you are perfect in who you are and who God created you to be.
Yep.
And there's a perfecting work to be done in you.
Yeah.
And those things are hard to carry at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and I think, it is hard to carry at the same time. I was going to say, like, some of this is like connected to the Sermon on the Mount. And it's also connected to Proverbs 1-9, I think. And I remember reading the Sermon on the Mount, and maybe it's just the way it's written. It can be really confusing for me. Like, blessed are the poor in spirit because of this.
Sure.
I'm like, what? I don't feel very blessed in that moment. And then like you look at this and you're like, oh, it just is like, it just keeps what I think just keeps getting flipped on its head. Like what I think is supposed to be, what I think, how things are supposed to work, it just keeps flipping on its head. And like you were saying something about aspiration, and I was thinking about just when you start something new, it's really easy for us to think we should be experts. Like it's so easy for me to think I should have something figured out before I actually have it figured out. And even just feel like a failure when you don't have it figured out, or you make a mess of something, or you screw something up that you're new at, especially in relationship, at least for me, relationship. Like you think, I don't know, it's just really easy to come into something new and in pride even just think I can do this.
Well, I think that,
and then
one of the harmful things that church has done is this idea of like that salvation leads to this transformation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we go, and so there's this expectation that, oh, I raised my hand, or I prayed this prayer, or I was baptized, or I joined the church, all these things. And there should be immediate gratification that my life has changed, everything's fixed, and I don't do anything bad anymore, and all the struggles are gone. Like all these things, right?
Yeah.
But James is very clear here. These things that you look at this list of things that he's encouraging people to do and be, these are things that you really only do them. They're actually just practices.
Yeah.
Like, being persistent, how do you do that? Well, you just commit. And then you
and then you're
when it gets hard, and you commit again.
Yeah.
And then you just keep committing to it. And even when it feels like you're hitting a wall, you just like, okay, I'm committing to this, I guess. That's being persistent, and it sucks sometimes. Or like seeking wisdom. Like, how do you, like, if you lack wisdom in something, like, well, you practice.
Yeah.
You see how other people do it, or being like humility, like how, I don't know. I think there's a lot of times where you have to take each of these things and figure out practically, how do I practice these things? Because it's like any other thing in life. Like, you only get good at the things that you practice.
Yep. And
so expecting to be an expert immediately, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah. And others, because they're like, oh, we thought you had this. Nope, you don't have it figured out.
Well, I've experienced it too, where people join a church community, and then, life happens, and something happens, something from their past pulls them away. They fall back into, like, addiction's a good example. Like, someone is trying to get their life on track, and they participate in a church community, and then they fall back into an addiction because life is hard, and that happens sometimes with people. And there's so much shame, like having gone back to their previous life, or whatever, however you want to phrase it. that it's hard for them to reconnect or admit or any of these things. And man, church should be a place where we get to see these things practice out in our lives and the people of others. Like, we should be able to be like, hey, I wasn't humble in that moment.
Yeah.
And I should, rather than that being something that drives me away, it should be something that is celebrated.
Yeah.
It should be celebrated when somebody
recognizes it.
Yeah, recognizes it and is working on it.
Yeah.
And so we're so quick normally to want to be like, oh, you didn't live up to the standard, you can't participate in the same way or something.
Well, I think like what you just said about addiction was really like on point, because something that like I did a few classes in addiction studies when I was studying, and one of the things that I've heard a few different times is part of recovery is relapse. Like, relapse doesn't not happen. Most of the time, there's some relapse. Not all the time, I don't want to say that, but most of the time, there's some relapse. And like, that's this. Like, be persistent. Okay, I'm going to do really great for 5 days, and then I'm going to relapse, and I'm not going to be persistent. And I feel like it's just a process. It's all a big, long life process.
Yeah, and that's why I think he starts with endurance.
Yep.
Because it's not something that just
you
can't just choose it.
No.
Like, you have to keep choosing it.
Yeah. And the end goal is maturity, hopefully.
Yeah, I do think
sometimes it works.
Yeah. I think if I had to push back on James at all, it would be his emphasis on that. When you read James, it can feel like perfection is available.
Yeah.
I don't actually know if I believe that, like, a rival to that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if.
No.
I've never met a perfect person.
Well, and I think I was thinking about what you said earlier about aspiring to something. Like, I feel like aspiring to be fully mature and grow is important, or complete and whole. Aspiring to wholeness and complete. But yeah, I don't think that. Elijah, is that the one that went up in the chariot because he was perfect?
Sure, maybe. he arrived.
I apparently think he was riding a horse. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say something and then I got distracted by the chariot.
Sorry.
But must have not been that important. But I think James is helpful. I think James, especially in the beginning, I feel like it's important to understand the context in which James is written, because life was not that life is easy necessarily now, but life was really hard for early followers, especially James, who is martyred at the end of his life. And the chance of me being martyred is pretty low.
Pretty low. I don't know,
pretty low. And so that changes when that's a reality for you. It changes how you write. It's a little more intense.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
We should understand that. Yeah. And so, anything else that we're missing about this first part of James?
No, I'm sure there is, but what you just said in just wrapping up made me think is like, when you're in a spot where life is so tough, where like you don't know if you're going to have enough food and you're being persecuted and you're at the bottom, like seeing some aspirational things to seeing a promise that God can make you complete and make you whole is a very different perspective than where we're coming from.
Yeah, very.
So I think, just that the perfectionism of the writing may be just more.
It was probably seen as hopeful to them versus
I can't do this.
A heavy weight that we can see it is today, which is important to wrestle with. So. Yep. Cool. Rich isn't here for his wrap up, so that's all you guys get.
No wrap up.
See you guys next week for the second part of James.